Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, doing this one from the comfort of this sandbag bunker. Check this out, guys. Did you guys know that's legal in Canada? Turkish, wooden stock, 12 gauge, double barrel, shoddy, bow body. Don't worry, it's been proven safe. We're gonna do a review on this and many other items in the not so distant future. But of course, we must talk about World War III. Now, listen to me, guys. I'm amazed that the closer and closer we get to World War III, and it is World War III, it's not that it's coming, it's that we're in it, it seems as though people's interest is waning in the whole thing, and that's very, very dangerous. And I guess I'm somewhat culpable for that because I've been talking about this for the longest time, but get a load of these bullet points with respect to what's happened today. Moldova is going to let the Ukrainians enter their country. They've had shipments of weapons from Poland today, and I'm sure from Ukraine as well. They're going to allow Ukraine to access their country so that they can flank Transnistria and the couple thousand Russian soldiers that are there, protecting these massive ammo depots. So what some people are predicting is going to happen, because of course this means that Moldova is now going to be a target, right? Moldova not currently in NATO, but in talks to become part of NATO. Now we know that Romania, months ago, they were already preparing air defense in and around the border region with Moldova. Sorry I don't have the map today, guys. I need a break from the map. I need a break from screens. I just want to talk freely. And we know that they've been preparing for this for some time. We know that you have the 101st Airborne in Romania. I'm not sure if they're still there. I know some of them have been deployed to Kosovo. But what's going to probably happen is they might actually blow the ammo dumps. If the Russians feel that it's futile to defend it, they're going to blow these old Soviet-era ammo dumps. And these are massive. Okay, the biggest ammo dump, in fact, in Europe is in Transnistria. All old Soviet stock ammo, the stuff that Ukraine needs. So they want to commandeer that. Moldova has opened the gates. They've signed agreements between the UK and the Ukraine to allow them to come in there, utilize their territory to act as a launch pad for Transnistria. This is huge. This is the war spreading beyond the borders. Moldova is now going to be party to the conflict. As far as I know, there's a lot of Moldovans who aren't a big fan of this. There's a lot of pro-Russian Moldovans. So it's going to be interesting to see what sort of civil unrest emerges there. Now today, Russia was the subject again of some major attacks into their country. Now, understand that just a year ago, and I have to keep saying this, it's become normal now that Russia has guys on their border doing incursions into the country on a frequent basis. Now it's reached a point where they're actually starting to, according to some channels, it depends on who you listen to, they're starting to make a little ground. Typically what happens is they do these Pyrrhic intrusions and then they're pushed out. But they've been hitting the Russians pretty hard with respect to their critical infrastructure. A massive oil refinery just went up in flames, okay? So Ukraine is not out of this fight, for anybody who's saying that they're completely out, which is not to say that the Russians haven't really pulled the trigger yet. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. Another thing that has happened today is that the U.S. has stopped officially transmitting New START data. Okay, so the last remaining nuclear treaty is now null and void, completely not being honored by either side, even if it was up until this point, it's likely that the data was insufficient or it couldn't be validated by either side anyways. So this is very significant. I got to put my sunglasses on because the light's shining in here. So we've stopped transmitting New START data. That means that we don't know when they're going to do their ICBM launches. We don't know if it's real world or exercise, and vice versa. The location of various strategic forces, the location of various submarines, and there's no more limits now on how many nuclear weapons can be deployed. It's open season. It's the wild, wild west. We're back to the Cold War, but worse, because arguably the weapon systems, well, maybe they're a bit more precise. I was going to say that we have the capability of doing more destruction than we could during the height of the Cold War. But now that we have the more precision-guided weapons, you don't need as big of a nuclear explosion. So I'll walk that back. Definitely the Cuban Missile Crisis doesn't hold a candle to what it is today, because now the Soviets actually, the Russians, actually have the capability to wipe us out many times over, and they have distinct advantages when it comes to winning a nuclear war. We've been releasing numerous shorts lately. Now, that's major, huge escalation. Command and control centers abound. We talked yesterday about the Russians running nuclear exercises. The Americans are doing it on a daily basis. DEFCON is higher than high. There's this one channel called the DEFCON warning system, complete and utter bullshit. I don't believe anything out of that channel. Nothing they say has mapped on to reality whatsoever. Ever since the stratospheric balloon incident, this type of activity has been commonplace on a daily basis. So make no mistake, we are at a very high state of combat readiness. The Russians have been retrofitting old Soviet-era bunkers for the past year. News came out today by Newsweek that, and take it with a grain of salt because it's Newsweek, they're very pro-Western, but Putin is going to be authorizing the building of yet another bunker. This is one that is out in the open. For everyone that is out in the open, we can probably assume that there are many being built in secret. But this one is under a hospital where apparently a lot of high-ranking officials go to get medical care. But they're going to be building a massive underground bunker complex under this hospital, okay? Now, the U.S. Senate has called for the creation of a war tribunal for Vladimir Putin. Now, ask yourself this question. You know, with Lindsey Graham talking about Putin going to The Hague and possibly becoming party to the Roman Statute of the International Criminal Court, can you really, in any reality, see Vladimir Putin in handcuffs? Can you? Because I certainly can't. Something is going to have to happen. Putin is going to have to go. And if Putin goes, who's going to be in charge? That is the question. But it appears as though that there are real concerns about division within the ranks in Russia, according to a Russian general, for which I'm going to read you what he had to say because it's a translation and it was on Russian state-sponsored media, okay? He's basically calling for full mobilization. You have the Pentagon, who is going to be paying Starlink's bills. Yesterday we talked about how there was rumblings in the Kremlin that they're going to have to start taking out Starlink. I think they were jamming it, and that is how they are countering the drone threats, but there may be more direct kinetic response from the Russians to deal with Starlink, because Starlink is what is enabling a lot of these drones to operate within Russian airspace, supposedly, as far as I know. Anyways, there's been some massive NATO drills on the Belarusian border, and Lukashenko claims that Poland, Latvia, and Ukraine are planning to overthrow his government. This is something he explicitly stated today, but of course everybody says that he's, you know, it's kind of like the Zaluzhny thing, but with no real substance to back it up, that he is dead or he's in the hospital or he's critically ill or whatever because he had a bandage on his hand or something. Anyways, he claims that Poland, Latvia, and Ukraine are hatching a plan to overthrow Belarus. This is why there's so much activity along those borders. This is why come June 11th, when this exercise is kicking off in Germany, which will be the biggest NATO air exercise ever executed, it's important to pay close attention to that, because there are no military exercises, only World War III disguises. When the war breaks out, when any war breaks out, it's going to come under the guise of a disguise. Does that make sense? Under the guise of a disguise? Anyways, so it's very important that we keep our eye on these things. In mid-July, there's going to be a NATO conference in Vilnius. Ukraine has to do something to prove that they are going to have a shot in hell in defeating the Russians before that happens. So it's very likely that we're going to see some major maneuvers before that. Now, Ukraine is thinking out of the box. We've been talking about Transnistria for probably since the war began. We knew that there was going to be something coming there eventually, and it appears as though what they're trying to do is really divide the Russians' attention and their forces. So forcing the Russians to now think about Transnistria, because of course Moldova is going to now be party to the conflict, thinking about the Belgorod, Bryansk, Kursk borders, as well as the entire front and the northern Belarusian front as well. So it's just a huge area, 1,000 miles plus of area that the Russians need to defend. They don't know where the attack is going to be coming from. So it's quite possible that Ukraine is going to stage a victory of some sort. Transnistria is probably the easiest pickings because it's the least defended. Now, the question is, if Ukraine decides to go into Transnistria, let me just make sure that I'm focused here for you guys, because there we go. If they do that, what is the response from Russia going to be? This is not going to be territory. This is an unofficial part of Russia. It's technically a part of Moldova, very pro-Russian, very much like a situation of the annexed territories. Is Russia going to let it slide? Or are they going to formally annex Transnistria? I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. That is the question. And what will the consequence be? Well, we've seen that the Russians have annexed 4 territories within Ukraine. About 30% of those territories is still in Ukrainians' hands. There hasn't been a major non-conventional response, as many people thought there would be, myself included. I admit when I'm wrong. I thought there might be a tactical nuclear response, a demonstrative strike somewhere, but there wasn't. So maybe they're not going to care too much. What I do think will happen is they're not going to let that Soviet-era munition, if there's even any left, we don't really know what's there. If there's any left, I don't think they're going to let that fall into the hands of Ukrainians. That would be really, really dumb. If anything, they're going to retreat from Transnistria if it can't be defended. If it can't be defended. There's only 2,000 troops there, as far as we know, unless they've been getting more troops in there somehow. But the question is, how would they do it? Because it's cut off from Crimea. It's cut off, like the Ukrainians control Odessa. They control Moldova now. So there's no access into that place. Sorry for any of you who don't understand the geography of what I'm talking about. Just understand that the war is about to spread into the direction of greater Eastern Europe, okay, into Romania and Moldova. That's a big issue because this is where NATO could potentially become involved in the conflict. It cannot be understated how significant it is that Moldova is now opening its legs to the Zelensky regime, okay? The debt ceiling apparently has no limits for Ukraine aid. I wasn't aware of this. I wasn't aware that the Ukrainian aid is not even a part of it's not even factored into the debt ceiling. So it's not even factored into the deficit or the budget. It's just they can give as much as they want and they'll try to make up for it in other places. Isn't that fascinating? How they've basically, what that means is they have a blank check. So I'm pretty sure if you haven't gotten in on the military-industrial complex stocks yet, now would be the time to do that. I want to also say, I made a comment yesterday about NVIDIA, and I've been giving NVIDIA a hard time. And I don't want to be that guy because I was one of the early adopters to Tesla. I was one of the early investors to Tesla. I rode the bull run all the way up. I got lucky for once in the markets because I knew the company had a lot of promise when a lot of people were. I just seen that the technology was the future for the most part. And I do believe that NVIDIA is going to be doing incredible things. I just think right now, because they are so intimately tied to Taiwan's manufacturing facilities for chips, I'm very reluctant to jump in on that one. Okay, as tempting as it might be, I think there's going to be bag holders if and when something breaks out on the China front. And it appears as though that situation is not getting any better anytime soon. In fact, it is getting worse by the day. The amount of incursions into Taiwanese airspace in the past year have already been record-breaking. China has even put offshore infrastructural projects on hold, like they wanted to build a floating nuclear power plant. This thing has been planned for 10 plus years, and now they're putting the project on hold because they're worried that it's going to be attacked or it's going to be sabotaged like Nord Stream. You have lines of communication breaking down between the US military and the Chinese military. You have those close, aggressive Russians with both militaries' aircraft. It's just looking as though the situation is deteriorating. You have Taiwan getting frequent shipments of weapons, and weapons that you would anticipate they would need to use in a war like this. So when all said and done, I'm not convinced that war is not going to break out on the Taiwan Strait soon, much less forever. Okay, I think that it's inevitable that it's going to happen at some point, because our global monetary system, and without getting into all the nuance of this, is intimately tied to our ability to contain China and Russia. If we can't do that, global economic hegemony is something that gets passed on to BRICS or someone else. So very, very serious stuff. Now, this is what this Russian general had to say on Russian state media television, okay? He says, it won't end. It won't get back to normal, in reference to the attacks on Moscow and in reference to the attacks on the border regions where they're, apparently blowing up buildings in Belgorod, getting closer to Belgorod. Is that all just a diversionary tactic to take attention away from, what some people are saying is going to be an incursion over the Dnieper River in the south? Because there were sightings of large convoys of, what are those things called? Pontoon bridges. And that was in Bulgaria, but some people suspected that that's possibly en route to Ukraine. Anyways, let me get back to what he was saying here. It won't end well. It won't go back to normal. Not everyone is getting it yet. Talking about Muscovites, right? Moscovites, people from Moscow, including some sitting close to the Kremlin. Maybe something should be done so they understand. And I should note that I'm paraphrasing this, and it's a translation. So if you go searching for this, you're probably not going to find it. But I can post a link if anybody really wants to challenge me on it. It's on YouTube, social media, or Russian Media Monitor if you want to go and check it out. Let's move beyond populist slogans. Let's bring order to the front. We're really at war. All of us, the whole country, we're at war with an enemy who set out as a goal to destroy our country. Who doesn't understand this? Spies are everywhere, and we shouldn't be filming the attacks. Well, the only way you outlaw filming the attacks is with some fairly heavy-handed draconian-style laws that are currently in place in Ukraine. Right? You have to ban the filming of public property or anything. Just ban filming, ban uploading, which means you have to have a very tight control over the internet, and which means martial law, essentially, in some ways. Spies are everywhere. We don't know where these drones are coming from Ukraine or from inside Russian territory. Some people suspect that it's the MI6. Some people suspect that it's Special Ops, UK Special Ops, the same ones who may have had something to do with the drone attack on the Crimean Kerch Bridge. It's crystal clear that our enemies are within. He said it's crystal clear that our enemies are within. So he doesn't think that these drones are coming from Ukraine. Now that's substantial, because that would mean that there is a sizable either a partisan or work of saboteurs coming from inside the country. Russia is vast. This is a vast forested region. There's 1,000 ways to just walk a few guys across the border under the cover of just the trees, never mind the cover of darkness, and you'd probably never be found. So it's, when people talk about, why can't they defend the border? Well, number one, it's a massive border. Number two, it's also open commercial airspace for the most part. So just shooting small drones down that can't even be picked up by radar is a problem, even though Russian radar claims that they can see things the size of a football from thousands of miles away. Anyways, the enemies are still here. They have to be purged. This is all over the country. We should seriously think about a civil defense. Everyone is walking around way too relaxed. So he's talking about going into a heightened state of mobilization, a heightened state of maybe not martial law. I think Russia has a stage, like a 5-stage level system for how far they go into martial law. And I'm not sure where the rest of the country is. I think at the epicenter of the conflict, it's highest. It's full-blown martial law in the annexed territories, and it recedes and diminishes in the encircling regions away from the epicenter. So serious stuff is going on right now. As I said, Putin is building a new bomb shelter for Russia's elites. You know, this is just what we know about, okay? And the writing is on the wall. You see, this is the thing. Like, when Russia was setting up those air defense systems in Moscow, you would think that that would, you know, tip people off that there is going to be a war and it's going to spread over into the capital. And when it does, Putin's finger is going to be hovering over the button, as is ours, probably. There's probably still people within Washington that think they can do some kind of decapitation strike. We have no nuclear treaty anymore. The war is getting ready to spread to Moldova. I mean, the war is spreading. What more do I have to say? I'm not even going to read that. Like, it's here. You need to prep for it. You need to prepare. Everybody who is starry-eyed right now, looking at the markets, waiting to see what's going to happen, hoping for the best, I'm here to disappoint you in saying that things are going to get worse, okay? Things are going to get worse. I would bet the house on things getting worse right now, because Zelensky has made it abundantly clear that unless they enter NATO, unless they're given a roadmap to enter NATO or some security guarantees which would bring NATO into the conflict, that they're going to be unrelenting, okay? They're not going to go to the negotiating table. I don't know what more to say. I don't even know why I keep doing these daily videos, to be brutally honest, because it just seems pointless at this point in time. You know, maybe, I mean, it's not pointless because it's important to know exactly where we are in terms of the plot of this whole thing. But I think people's time is better served by just ensuring that you have everything squared away. And we release a couple videos a week that are not Daily Dose of Doom and Gloom related. We try to put a lot of work into those. And we do have a lot of fun stuff coming. You got to keep having fun. You don't live in fear. If you're a prepper, you have no need to live in fear. The people who need to live in fear are the people who say that nothing is going to happen, because something bad is going to happen. I can feel it in my bones. Something really, really bad is coming, okay? And I hope, like I said in the video yesterday, I used to think over the past year and a half in the early parts of this conflict, I would question myself, and I always do a lot of self-reflection after I do these daily monologues, and I ask myself, am I on the mark here? Am I going too far in my prognostication? Am I way off? I used to really doubt my views, but now every single day it becomes more solidified in my mind that it's inevitable, because everything that we've suspected could happen, whether it's the delivery of more weapons, whether it's countries getting involved, every escalation that we could have imagined has happened. It's just been on a protracted timeline. So my friends, do yourself a favor and keep thinking about preparing for the shizzy hitting the fizzy and the end of the world as we know it. I have a feeling that someday you will not be disappointed. There's a scene in the movie The Road where, if you ever seen the movie The Road, you better go and watch it, where they meet this traveler. It's closer to the end of the movie, and they're having a chat around a campfire. They found some canned food. This is after the apocalypse, right? And the guy's asking, he's talking to him, he's like, you know, how could we ever have prepared for such a thing? Like, even if you knew, how would you prepare for such a thing? And that is a really serious question. And a lot of people are going to say, well, I'm just not going to prepare at all, until you find yourself still alive in a really crappy situation and people you love are still alive, and you have to watch them suffer slowly That's a situation you don't want to be in. You don't want to be in a situation where you're still alive and you're in the, you're in a very austere situation. That's probably not even the right word to use. You're in a Mad Max situation and you haven't prepared, because the fact is you're probably going to survive. Most people will survive a nuclear exchange. I'm almost positive, actually, that it's not necessarily going to be an instantaneous everybody blowing their load at the same time, like the Russians just shoot everything. I think it might be a bit more gradual than people realize. There might be some limited strikes, maybe on decision-making centers, and there might be some return fire. There might be time, and it's not just going to be everybody's wiped out. No, it's going to be a whimper, not a bang. And that's, people just think, oh, I'm going to go in the mushroom cloud and that's going to be it, and there's going to be no suffering. But it's a suffering part, And you don't want to, all these people who say, well, I wouldn't want to live in that world anyways, you're probably going to survive. And so you don't want to be a burden on the people around you. And I know this all seems crazy, but man, like, the governments of the world are preparing for it. Do you seriously think the people who are in charge right now give two flying FUCKs about you? Did you see the Hunter Biden stuff today? Did you see the president tripping over himself? Did you hear Pierre roast Trudeau in Parliament about why he had to stop being a teacher and whatever sort of misconduct of a sexual nature had him resign from that position? Do you seriously think these people have your best interests in mind? Guys, they don't. In Moscow, they are retrofitting bunkers to accommodate millions of people. What sort of civil defense infrastructure do we have here? Now, in Canada, during the Cold War, we did have a civil defense infrastructure. There were radiation reporting stations, and in fact, we've shown this on the channel before. You can go, and there's a Google interactive map tool which will show you where every fallout shelter is in Canada, and there's around 2,000, believe it or not. Most of these are just radiation reporting stations. So they were for the purpose of, if the worst happened, can we kind of have a few guys in each part of the country? And Canada is a massive country, so 2,000 bunkers it sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot in terms of covering actual area. But a lot of these places were just retrofitted post offices, jails, police stations, basements that were somewhat fortified, given a few pieces of equipment, hazmat equipment, protective equipment, and maybe some provisions to carry people through for a couple weeks. But above and beyond that, we have nothing right now, okay? Nothing. So we are on par, we're on course to reach that ultimate conclusion, and there is really little, if anything, that is being done. In fact, we're working in the opposite direction, whether that's NATO, the European Union, independent member states. There's no diplomacy. Diplomacy is dwindling. Germany is shutting down Russian consulates. They're expelling diplomats. Everything is moving in exactly the wrong direction. They're talking about how they can bring up, Putin on charges in the International Criminal Court and have some sort of tribunal, which we know is never going to fly. So everything is moving into the direction of they're trying to take down Russia. And now we're in the phase of the Russian people are going to mobilize, like truly mobilize. We're in the phase where the Russians realize that this is not a special military operation. It's a war. And if Belarus, for some reason, falls, then, my God, there's nukes in Belarus right now. There are some of Russia's best equipment is in Belarus right now. I cannot see a scenario unfolding where that does not escalate to the use of non-conventional weapons. It simply is not going to happen. So I'm not sure what the gamblers in charge have up their sleeve, if they know something that we don't, or if they're just gambling and they're perfectly content destroying the world, cutting off their nose to spite their face, and they'll emerge from their bunkers with their automation and their cool NVIDIA graphics cards and their LLMs that they can talk to, because there probably will be 90% of us gone, but they'll have AI to talk to that can formulate relationships in their bunkers while in their cryo sleep or whatever the hell. Guys, keep on prepping, man. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and if you would be so kind, go and give that video we released today some love. It's about AI and a very distinguished researcher who predicted all of this stuff 40 years ago. And of course, it's the people like that who never get the attention they deserve. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.